Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Amina Blayk. I'm from Sheffield, UK. The area that I live in Sheffield is an area that's near a place called the Peak District National Park, which is an area of outstanding beauty. It's also an area where there aren't very many Muslims, in fact, no Muslims really, apart from our family. My father was a professor of English language and linguistics at Sheffield University. I was actually adopted. When I was born, I was born on the 15th of Ramadan, on a Friday. Because my father was a professor at the university, he had a lot of foreign students. And he had these amazing Muslim students who were generally Egyptian actually, and he used to invite them to the house, or we'd be invited to their house. So through that I knew what Muslims were, and when I went to school there were Muslims at school. Not very many, but there were a few Muslims at school. But I didn't know anything about Islam. I think there's a huge difference between knowing Muslims and actually knowing Islam. It's two very, very different things. Having been brought up in a very multicultural background, I had quite a diverse set of friends from diverse backgrounds and also socioeconomically as well. And when I turned sort of 17, I had a Pakistani girlfriend, and I used to sort of go out nightclubbing and stuff with her and to local pubs and stuff, and culturally that's what that's what a lot of non-Muslims do. That's our way of that was our way of socialising, and it ended up that we became quite close friends, and I used to visit her house a lot. And I saw a book on the side once. I knew she was Muslim, but I didn't really ask her much. And I saw a book on the side, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And she said, "Oh, this is the Quran." I was like, okay, well, tell me what's the Quran, and I just started asking a few questions about the belief. And I'd always, in my upbringing, I was brought up as a Protestant Christian, and I was very strong on believing in God. I always believed in God. I had issues with the concept of the Bible being the Word of God, simply because there were so many contradictions in terms of science, in terms of the stories that were being related by the apostles, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. They would say the same story in different ways, with different numbers, and there was a lot of contradiction. I'm a person, I'm very black and white, and I like things to be proved to me. If you're going to tell me something, then you need to show me that what you're saying is correct. Otherwise, what's the point of me following this? These are questions that I was asking my friend as well when she showed me the Quran, and she didn't really have the answer to the questions, because I asked about science, because in the Bible there are some scientific things that actually contradict what modern science has already proven, and this is another thing I had issues with. So she said, okay, well, I've got this next door neighbour who's this English guy who's become Muslim. Maybe we can go and ask him about it. So we went over, and we were invited over for a cup of tea to his house, and I asked all these questions to him, and he said, leave it with me. I'm going to ask some questions to get the proper evidence for you, and then I'll come back to you. So anyway, a few days later, he brought all this evidence from the Quran, of the science, talking about the fact that the fetus, how it develops, how the mountains are stakes in the earth, about the water cycle, the Big Bang theory, and all these amazing things, the earth being egg-shaped, and it absolutely blew me away. I was like, this has to be correct. 1500 years ago in a desert, this guy, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was living and didn't have any access to any of these scientific facts at all, and he was just told this stuff, and how could he have known all these different things? And this was my logical brain working. but I wasn't quite ready to take my Shahada. I believed in it, but I hadn't actually embraced it yet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works in amazing ways, and this brother, my friend's next door neighbour, actually gave us a copy of the film Risala in English. And as a teenager, I was sort of in and out of the room and, you know, doing other things. It's a long film, 3 hours. 3 hours for somebody like me at 17 years old was a long time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made me come into the room when the TV was on, at the last section of the film, when Bilal radiallahu anh is standing on the top of the Kaaba and recites the first adhan. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. When I heard the adhan, I got the most, well, it was a boost of Iman. And the most amazing feeling I felt in my life. It was like almost this wash of warmth over me, and every single hair on me just stood on end. And I knew at that moment that I had to become part of this faith that had such an amazing call to prayer. And that was when the emotional side of my brain was then engaged with the academic, and I took my Shahada maybe 2 days later. Once I'd taken my Shahada and became a Muslim, the first hurdle to cross was telling my family. I wasn't sure how they would react, but they didn't quite react how I expected them to. My father was quite accepting of the whole situation. He was slightly concerned, I think, that I would maybe be oppressed, or actually I think his exact words was, "This is a phase that you're going through." It's been 23 years, so it's been a very, very long phase. But my mother, she reacted slightly differently. She thought that I was making mistakes. She thought I would be oppressed. She wasn't very keen on me being Muslim. However, where I was very lucky and very blessed, alhamdulillah, was that both my parents accepted that I'd become Muslim. When it came to friends, again, I had very, very different reactions. A lot of my friends were from multicultural backgrounds anyway, so the ones that were, I had one friend who was half Moroccan, half English, and she wasn't Muslim, but obviously she was very accepting of me becoming Muslim. But then I had other friends who weren't from diverse backgrounds, who thought I was completely crazy. And what are you doing? Why are you doing this? You know, what are you trying to do with your life? And disagreed with me. And actually, you know, I lost a lot of friends through it. The friends that I did retain were very, very few in number. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaced those friends with new contacts and new friends, you know. And I thought to myself, well, you know, whether my friend is a Muslim or a non-Muslim, a friend is a friend. Hello, how are you? Hi. Come and sit down, come in. Oh. So, this is my friend Nikki. We've known each other for maybe about 5 years now.
4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years, yeah. She used to be my next door neighbour when I was living just up the road. What about, like, you know, like Muslims in general? What was your perception of sort of Islam and, you know, with all the media stuff that's been going on and stuff?
I don't find them generally, and this is very general, very approachable. They seem to be quite a closed community. They don't seem to integrate particularly well, or make the effort. They obviously there seems to be quite, you don't necessarily understand what goes on in that culture, which makes people a bit standoffish. There's also quite a lot of language difficulties. You tend to find that if they're coming in from abroad, they generally don't try and learn the language here. So they have their own communities in their own areas and they integrate with themselves, but don't tend to move outside of those circles. So was a little bit concerned, and that's what the perception was, I think. With
So what about when you when you met me then? How did that change your perception?
Well, I actually think I saw your husband first, and obviously he was Arab. I think I caught the back of your headscarf, so I was quite surprised that you were white. I was expecting an Arab lady. So we hit it off quite quickly across the fence, didn't we?
Yeah,
we got on quite well. So yeah, I think those preconceptions immediately were, that wasn't what I was expecting at all. And the fact that you were really well educated, and that came across really quickly.
My first Ramadan as a Muslim was really interesting. I had absolutely no clue how to fast because I wasn't going to study circles at that time. And I remember I was actually working at a sewing factory. I think it was actually around Christmas time, and so that was another thing that I faced, the whole change of Christmas. But Ramadan and Christmas were at about the same time, and I didn't know anything about covering your head. I didn't know how to fast. I thought it was kind of like the Christian Lent, where you had to like give something up. So I decided I was going to give chocolate up for that one. So and also start covering my head. And so I didn't know what a hijab was. The first tarbiyah that I received for learning how to pray, learning how to fast, learning how to wear hijab was actually when I met Sister Tracy, and she took me to the study circles. Previously to that, I was almost sort of floating around with nowhere to go. I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know how to do anything in Islam. And this is why, following that and following her support, I became very actively involved with supporting Muslims, new Muslims, as well as born Muslims who are coming and starting practicing when they've become from a very cultural background. I think it's very important to remember that it's not just new Muslims who have this awakening, who suddenly want to learn about Islam. Very many cultural Muslims aren't taught much about Islam at all, especially living in the Western context, and they almost fall into the category of being new Muslims and have quite similar needs as far as their tarbiyah is concerned. And obviously as a new Muslim, I was one of those. So, you know, my first tarbiyah actually was came from a prayer. I was asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my sort of ignorant state, saying, look, Allah, you know, I really want to learn how to pray, and I really want to learn how to wear the hijab, and I don't know how to do this. Please, Ya Allah, send me somebody to teach me. I need to learn. And this is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually led me straight to Sister Tracy, and she was the one who taught me.
I mean, when I first met you, obviously, my perception of why ladies covered, and I think that is part of the issue with why people find it quite intimidating to approach Muslim ladies, is the covering. It's obviously quite alien to us to cover ourselves.
Unless you're over 80.
Unless you're over 80. But I actually thought it was something to do with your husband was making you cover, and was quite surprised to read in the Quran that it's not all about that, and that it's choice. And I actually think it's quite beautiful that you cover for your husband, for his eyes only. To me, that's logical, and quite special. I think that's really quite something that I've learned not to judge and see it as a sign of oppression, which I think a lot of white Christians do see it as a sign of oppression.
Absolutely. I guess that's because the media kind of says, oh,
Totally.
these poor oppressed
Yeah,
Muslim women who
definitely.
are walking 10 paces behind their husbands and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can understand why a lot of people, you know,
Yeah.
feel like that. But I guess it's people who maybe haven't met. Muslims
Yeah, I
who
think that
cover
night
them.
that I came quite early on, when I met all the sisters,
Oh yeah,
that was an eye-opener.
our wild party.
That was an eye-opener. And certainly, you know, from the point of view of coming away, and it was just like any other night with the girls,
Yeah, absolutely.
Just without the alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was very similar to how any other girly party would go, and that really opened my eyes up to actually they're just same as me, just they have a different religion.
Yeah, yeah. I've been working with the Muslim community in Sheffield and nationally for about 18 years now. I'm on a Saturday evening, sometimes I'm invited to give a talk at the Khalaqa in the Fatima Community Centre, which is a centre that I was actually involved in setting up back in 2009. Quite a lot of reverts attend this circle, and the circle's been running actually for probably about 35 years, since even before I became Muslim. I direct a project called the Eden House Project, which is working with Muslim Welfare House, and we're building hostels for homeless ladies across the UK. We've got 2 at the moment. There's one in Birmingham and one in Sheffield, and we're just in the infancy of this. It's just being set up. The hostels are absolutely unique. They're catering on an Islamic level for Muslims, in particular for new Muslims who often get rejected by their families and they end up homeless, they end up on the streets. But it's also open to non-Muslim ladies as well. This is the centre.
الأخت أمينة بلايك أخت إنجليزية مسلمة، أنا أعرفها حقيقة منذ 20 سنة، وهي أخت نشطة جدا في مدينة شفيل وأيضا على مستوى بريطانيا. نشطة في العمل النسوي وأيضا العمل الدعوي، العمل التعليمي. الأخت أمينة أيضا نشطة جدا في مركز فاطمة الاجتماعي في مدينة شفيلد، وهناك برامج أسبوعية للنساء هي تنخرط فيها، برامج تعليمية في تعليم الفقه، برامج دعوية أيضا لبرامج دعوية للمسلمين الجدد، وبرامج اجتماعية أيضا برامج أسبوعية أيضا للاجتماع والتعارف، وأيضا قضاء أوقات ممتعة وأيضا دعوية في نفس الوقت. حقيقة مركز فاطمة ينشط في مجال الدعوة بالتركيز على النساء بالدرجة الأولى.
السلام عليكم, you're gorgeous. How are you, sweetie? I'm good, how are you? I'm good, thank you. السلام عليكم, my darling.
I'm نورة.
أمينة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So, Sister Jamila was talking about ways to prepare for Ramadan, and what I'm going to talk about as well is like really significant for preparing for Ramadan, because preparing for Ramadan is cut into different areas, and one of those areas is to understand when we go through affliction, when we go through problems and trials and tribulations, which every single one of us has. Preparing for Ramadan is like almost preparing within ourselves for any potential affliction that we're having. So all the things that we do, whether it's the salah or paying the sadaqah and the zakat, or making extra acts of worship, or even changing our behaviour, is all part of that process of leading up to Ramadan. And Ramadan we can use as a step up. Okay, why? Because the shaitan's not around, to be whispering to us, and we aren't having the wasted time, if you want to call it that, of food preparation. It's only in Ramadan you realise, isn't it, how much time you spend in preparing food and eating food. So we can use that extra time to give ourselves tarbiyah or development.
الأخت أمينة أيضا نشطة جدا، ولها العديد من الإسهامات، ولها نشاطات على المستوى الوطني أيضا داخل بريطانيا، وحقيقة يعني لها لمسات واضحة، ودائما تكون يعني معروفة لدينا أيضا بإسهاماتها الفعالة في العمل الدعوي على مستوى بريطانيا.
we'll begin and ask Sister Amina Bلايك from Sheffield to talk to you.
Thank you. جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Oh, I'm not hearing that at all. I'm really genuinely not hearing much. Come on. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's slightly better. See, it's the north. We're loud. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to be able to top the tones.